Welcome to A Line Through Time, where I take the time to look through your favourite franchises and work out how it all lines up. Before launch... Fucking hell, what's up with my voice then? Fuck it, I'm keeping it in. Before launching into Series 2, I thought I'd take a look back and go into some of the behind-the-scenes chicanery of the first series and its creation. You'd be surprised how frantic and tumultuous this show can get. The concept for the show came from a sequence of events that started with Did You Know Gaming of all things. Figuring they'd never cover Dynasty Warriors on the show, I made my own unofficial episode on the subject. I enjoyed making the video and people seemed to enjoy watching it if you counting comments or anything to go by. One utter legend even said that until the end they forgot it was unofficial. That's the kind of feedback I love, fella. After that, I did the same for the rival series Sengoku Basara. After that, I decided to try making an unofficial episode of another web series I liked, this time Game Theory. I wanted to work out the age of Dante across the Devil May Cry series and, well, Game Theory was in the midst of the year of FNAF, which was mainly focused on the timeline, so it seemed like the perfect marriage of ideas. I made the video and responses to it can be grouped into about 4 different categories. 1. This is really good. 2. This is really good, but I prefer it without the game theory elements. This can be polite or arsehole-ish. 3. Fuck you, the reboot was good. I mean, I guess. It's not the point of the video though, so it's fucking irrelevant. And of course, 4. Fuck you, you ripped off game theory, even though it's very clearly a loving tribute, you mongoloid twat. But with the sheer number of views and comments just demolishing everything else I've done in recent years, I figured, well, this is clearly something people want. Around the same time, I made a cleaned up version of the Devil May Cry timeline for my DeviantArt gallery, as well as an early attempt at Dead or Alive and Ninja Gaiden, and then I just started doing it for other series. I really enjoyed researching and making them, and it just made sense to make a proper go of it, to make a full YouTube show where I compile and convey timelines for various series. I took the basic structure of the DMC video, stripped out the game theory elements, and got started with the show's first proper episode. I started with Sonic the Hedgehog for 2 reasons. 1, it's a franchise that's very dear to me, and 2, because I'm a complete madman apparently. The 25th anniversary and the sheer monumentality of the task were probably contributing factors as well. I actually started researching, arranging and scripting in January 2016, but the big Mortal Kombat 2011 review Redux came up because its 5th anniversary was coming up, and yeah, it seemed like the ideal time to redo that review, and I get really hung up on arbitrary details like that, so the show only got started in late June. By the way, if you've not seen the MK review, I don't think we can be friends. The closing overview of the timeline caused some problems both here and in general. For Sonic, it's because that timeline is so massive and complicated, I had to significantly reduce it to keep the video under an hour. In fact, the split off extended timeline that lasts 15 minutes, yeah, that was supposed to be the cut down version. It actually started out a bit longer. And if I recall correctly, the writing, recording and editing of the final reduced version for the main video were all done on the day. I'm pretty sure it was a last minute decision to completely redo it for the main video, and it somehow worked out. Except that people can stop telling me about Sonic Pocket Adventure because I know it exists. The current top comment on the video is about Pocket Adventure. Other people have since ignored that and told me themselves about Pocket Adventure. I'm well aware of Pocket Adventure, and I'll be adding it when a few more games release and I have enough material to make a follow-up. Until then, stop telling me about Pocket Adventure, because I'm starting to feel like Dexter in that one episode where he's learned French while he sleep tape gets caught on a loop and he's subjected to one phrase so many times it's all he can say, I get it, shut the fuck up! The Street Fighter shared universe was next, and there's not too much to say about that. However, I knew I needed to explain what a sliding timescale was since it was relevant to the Street Fighter timeline. The problem was that if I ever needed to refer back to it in a later episode, I didn't want to say, hey, if you want to understand this concept, you need to go back and watch a 30-minute video on a completely different subject for one small section, because that's pretty fucked up, you know? So I instead made a separate video on the subject. The plan was to make it more of a regular thing where I defined certain terms in little side videos. It was going to have its own spin-off name like A Line to Define, with the line being blue in the logo instead of red, but I didn't end up going with that in the end, as you can obviously tell from this being the first you've ever heard of it. But little did I know that this little video would be key to the overall structure of the show later on. The show's original structure was supposed to be 2 timelines, then a supplementary episode that would be of comparable length to the timeline videos. The first of these supplementary episodes was on how to build a timeline. It turned out that I'd completely overestimated the length that one would turn out, leaving me with more of a main episode, side episode structure. I'm not sure I recognised that until after the Metroid video though. Speaking of which, Metroid was not supposed to be the 3rd series I covered. It was more of a last minute decision thanks to a little problem brought about by the end recap segments of the videos. See, I told you I'd come back to this even though I didn't. Basically the plan was Sonic, Street Fighter, building a timeline, Deus Ex, Hyrule Warriors remakes. The plan was to release the Deus Ex video on the day Deus Ex Mankind Divided released. There were 2 problems with this. 1, the Street Fighter episode had taken longer than expected, so I didn't really have the time to meet such a tight deadline. And 2, just try to imagine the recap. 2029, Adam Jensen faces off with the Illuminati and a terrorist group. 2052, like what? I can't do that. It's bad enough being unfinished, but for it to be in the middle where it's unfinished, that would be horrendous. So I chose to push Deus Ex back even though I'd made the title card and everything. I do still plan to cover the series eventually though, probably after Adam's trilogy concludes in Mankind Divided Part 2, the half Square Enix forcibly cut to create a trilogy because reasons. It's a pretty unique name for a game, I must say. So just to be clear, I won't cover a series with a new installment on the way because the timeline would be incomplete and very quickly outdated. I might make an exception for something that perpetually has its next installment announced before the current one is released, on the condition that there's a good point to conclude on. So without Deus Ex, I did Metroid next because its 30th anniversary had come earlier in the year, and it was also simple, which was something I needed after covering Sonic and Street Fighter, but it ended up being the only simple series I'd cover in Series 1 because I'm an obsessive freak. By this point, the new pattern was clear. Given the comparable lengths of the sliding timescales and building a timeline episodes, they were basically the same type of video anyway, so it was easy to just go with it. This led us to an episode on video game remakes, which was a pretty simple episode with not much to discuss beyond it finalising the show's structure. In addition to a structure, I set some criteria that need to be met by the series for me to cover it, at least until I inevitably run out of ideas. I need something of substance to discuss in the video, so I need either a series without a solidly defined timeline like Sonic or Ninja Gaiden, or a series that does have one but is overly complicated and could do with an explanation, like for instance Drakengard or the MCU. Yes, a line through time is not limited to video games and never has been, but those tend to have more to talk about and are less restrained by legal bullshit unless it's owned by one of a select few companies that can die in a fire. Hint, hint. So back to the show's timeline. Going off the original plan, Hyrule Warriors and its place in the Zelda timeline should have come next, but the plan was to make it a collaboration. My would-be collaborator happened to be moving at the time, so I put it on the back burner. Probably for the best, because I've since turned around on not covering the core Zelda timeline, so look out for those two at some point in the future. October and November of 2016 were a complete mess. First off, Tomb Raider's 20th anniversary is coming up at the end of October, so I thought, great, I can cover those three timelines. The problem was that I hadn't read any of the comics and I hadn't played Rise of the Tomb Raider and wasn't going to until the PS4 version released a couple weeks before the deadline. As such, I had to blaze through all the Dark Horse comics, about 5 volumes worth, script, record and edit what I could before Rise came out, blaze through Rise's main story and DLC, and write, record and edit that stuff within 2 weeks. But I somehow did it. Before the episode came out though, I became aware of the fact that Dead or Alive was also having its 20th anniversary almost exactly 1 month later. So I had 1 month to decipher that whole mess and make another big video, but I remind you, I'm a fucking crazy person, so I also wanted to maintain the episode pattern with another side episode, this one on prequels. This meant I was now going to be making 2 episodes in the same month, one of them being the huge DOA Ninja Gaiden one, and both right after the massive Tomb Raider episode. DOA had to meet its deadline, so I scripted and recorded that, then did the same for the other one while still editing DOA, and used the time I wasn't on my PC to work on that. I got it all done in the end, but it really took a lot out of me. After that I figured now was a good time to take a break and work on a review, which ended up being Injustice. That one ended up taking about 3.5 months to make because of all the shenanigans with PC problems and other projects, and that's why I plan to do reviews like that once a year at most from now on. But in the meantime, welcome to A Line Through Time Series 2, where I continue to take the time to look through your favourite franchises and work out how it all lines up. Oh, and this song isn't a hint for the next timeline, it's just that Mick Gordon is a fucking legend.